And staggering, given that he was a record-breaking paedophile, staggering it may be for me to say, but it's true, a tiny doorway. Because this thing is vast. I mean, we're going to go, we would go deep into some really deep esoteric things about why they want sex with children, but there's a reason for it. And the scale of it is absolutely vast. I was traveling America in the 1990s, from about 96. And I met a lot of people who were involved in MK Ultra, the government CIA military mind control operation that came to public attention, but only a tiny part of it. And these were people, kids who were taken into the project at a very young age, sometimes 5, 6 years of age. And then they were used mind control, basically mind controlled assets to do various things. But what happened within that whole MK Ultra was this vast sex with children ring was part of it. And I've named them in my books a long time ago. People like Father George Bush was a notorious, on the inside, serial paedophile and torturer of children. And so many of these people were. And there is a global network. And, you know, I was helping someone in America once who'd lost their adopted twins to the system, who had given these adopted twins to a woman, a single woman, which was a crazy thing to do on the face of it for the benefit of the kids. And the kids weren't treated very well by this woman who was connected into this whole ring. So in doing that, I started to realize how many children went missing every year. And what I did is I called the federal government and I wanted figures for the number of children went missing every year. And they said, we don't keep them. You tell me how many cars went missing and tell me how many children went missing. They said, you're going to have to ring every state. So I started ringing every state. And I don't know, I got to about 10 and 15. And I'm in such a figure by then of children going missing. It was staggering. So you see a story like Madeleine McCann, and what people do, and I do understand it, they get a feel for how many kids go missing and are never found by how many missing kids stories end up in the media. That is so tiny, it's almost infinitesimal compared with the kids that go missing. And then I was talking to a Zulu shaman in South Africa, Credo Mutwa. He starts telling me that one of the biggest problems they're having in their area is children going missing. Children are going missing all over the world. It's a stunning thing. And they get trafficked. They get trafficked out to famous people for sex and other abuse. And you realize the scale it's going on. But again, you're into that chasm between what's happening and what people think is going on. So they think, oh, it's so fantastic, that can't be happening, it's happening. And a lot of them end up dead in the end. I was the one, of course, that came out in The Biggest Secret, which was published in 1998, and named Ted Heath as a paedophile Satanist. And of course, it took 17 years for his name to then hit the public arena for the paedophilia. And this goes into the very top of society. The ratio of pedophiles and Satanists in the upper echelons of the societal hierarchy is vastly greater in the general population. There's a lot in the general population, but in the upper level, the ratio is ridiculous. And so you look at the Savile story, and it was that window. So I remember Jimmy Savile as a kid. And he was a disc jockey. They called him a disc jockey. He was a strange man. He had this white hair and all that stuff. And he became Jim will fix it with kids and everything, And he was a strange man. Then he kind of disappeared. And he got old and old and old. And what happened to him? But it turns out that even though he had no obvious income stream after he dropped out of being a famous so-called entertainer, he had houses all over the place. He had loads of cars. He had a Bentley and all this stuff. Where's the money coming from? What was lost in the revelations about Jimmy Savile is the reason that he got away with it. He was a procurer of children for the rich and famous. That's how he got away with it. And they had to watch his back to watch their own. And so he would provide children for these rich and famous people. This is why he was on very friendly terms with Ted Heath. So then you look at the other area of that Savile story that's never been explored, which absolutely should be, and it is this. In Savile's own words, in the 1960s, Lord Mountbatten, a known paedophile, invites Savile, who's a disc jockey, into the heart of the British royal family. It's how he became a close friend of Prince Charles, a close friend for a long time until they fell out, of Prince Philip, and in the inner circle, including the Queen. Sorry, banging that. And he remained in that inner centre of the circle, the inner circle of the royal family, right up to his death, basically, and a friend of Charles right up to his death. And I met a lady. In fact, I met her in a house I lived in just down the road from here. She came over to the Isle of Wight, spoke to me for a long time, who was a long-time friend of Princess Diana, friend of hers for about 9 years. And she told me about Savile. She told me about Savile because Diana had told her, and she knew from other sources as well. And she described how when Diana was married to Charles, that Savile was always all around all the time, and she thought he was sleazy and horrible and could stand him. Well, the reason he was there, let's put this together. He's at the inner core of the British royal family circle, and he's a procurer of children for the rich and famous, right? Now let's take another step. I remember seeing a film, just very quickly, a report, that the Queen was making a visit to this place. And this guy came up, and he's in the crowd, and he's going to protest, right? The security services knew he was there and came across. They knew he was there. They knew he was going. They knew he was going to be in the crowd. And you can't cough anywhere near the Queen without the security forces know about it and special branch know about it. The police clearly knew, because they interviewed him a number of times, that Jimmy Savile was a paedophile. And he's allowed into the inner circle of the British royal family, and special branch and MI5 are not screaming, what's going on? He's a paedophile. What you're doing, allowing him in there? No, he's allowed, while being interviewed by the police from time to time over paedophilia, to be in the inner circle of the royal family. Now, here's another one. Anyone thinks that's a coincidence? I've got some seafront property in Birmingham you'll like to buy sight unseen. But they got away with it because the system watches its own back. And, they're not even questioned about it. It's incredible. And then what happened, of course, when they had the so-called inquiry, when Theresa May was Home Secretary, she has this inquiry because she's forced into it by public opinion, basically, into elite paedophilia. She names someone who's clearly unacceptable and had to stand down because she wasn't. She then names another person who's clearly unacceptable and had to stand down because She wasn't. And what they're doing is they're putting time between the uproar in public and the point where anything happens. And now this inquiry is still going on, but of course it's hardly ever mentioned.
How nefarious were the activities of Ted Heath and Savile? Was Heath buggering boys and throwing them off boats, and was Savile a necro?
Oh yeah, this lady who was Princess Diana's friend for 9 years. She told me that Savile was a necrophiliac, sex with dead bodies, etc. Why do people think that he volunteered to be a porter at Leeds Hospital? It gave him access to the mortuary. And so she told me that. And then it came out later publicly that he was a necrophiliac. These people are not the same as everyone else. Just think of the empathy deletion necessary to do what he did at just that one man. And Ted Heath, I was told about him by a series of people who, most of the people that Ted Heath abused, the children, they didn't survive. Because Ted Heath was at a very famous face, the more people he abused who stayed alive, the dodgier it gets for his survival. And so they used to be killed, most of them. But I was told by a number of people, and it built up over a period of time, of what he did. And there was, I won't say what it is, because for obvious reasons, but when Wiltshire Police and the chief constable at the time, who has been not chief constable anymore, they kind of, they got him removed eventually, because you don't take these people on if you're in the system and survive. But he or the investigation team mentioned something when they were investigating Heath, that there was something that he did that was kind of, I would say, very, very strange. And that gave them sort of confidence that these people were telling the truth, because what they were describing was fantastic. And you really couldn't make it up. And you certainly couldn't make it up across several different people unconnected with each other. Well, I know what that was, because I was told by some of these people who claimed to be abused by Heath what he did when he was abusing them. And you absolutely could not make it up. If you sat here for the next hour saying, is it this, is it that? I'd just say no every time, because you wouldn't get it, because it's so fantastic. And that gave me confidence as well, because they were describing this particular way he did things that was so outrageous and yet incredibly consistent across all these people, formerly kids, that I was confident enough to go with it. And there was a journalist, well, what passes to be a journalist on the Isle of Wight, who, when The Biggest Secret came out in 1998, she called Ted Heath, who was still in the Parliament for another 7 years after this, and read him the passage. And all he said was, David Icke must be mad. That was it. And you see what I've accused him of? But never went anywhere, because they don't want this stuff in court. One other thing, very quickly, one of the little tricks they do is when they're really in trouble over paedophilia and stuff, or whatever, stuff like that, they'll produce someone who doesn't tell the truth. They'll name the people that others are naming truthfully, and then they'll be exposed as a fraud. And in doing that, they seek to, and it works, they seek to discredit all those people who are telling the truth through one who is not telling the truth, either through mind control or through the fact that he's just doing it because he's doing it.
Do you think another strategy is to satisfy the public outrage by sacrificing lower level paedophiles, such as Rolf Harris, Clifford, etc.?
Yeah, well, what they do, if you notice what happened when the story broke, is they went for people like Dave Lee Travers and stuff like that, which wasn't for paedophilia. It was for what was alleged to be, sexual inappropriation with women, right? But what did that do? Dave Lee Travers, and all these others, and it's moving the focus from the political pedophiles. I mean, the scale of it is absolutely fantastic, and it's happening in America as it's happening in Britain, as it's happening around the world. It's a ring. If you go deep enough into it, there's a reason why they're obsessed with sex with children. In the briefest summary, they are trawling the energy of children. And this has been explained to me by insiders in the West. It's been explained to me, the same thing happening, by the shaman in South Africa. There have been other books with other sources. They talk about the same thing. They're sucking the energy out of the kids because there's a particular energy before puberty. See, we see puberty as a hormonal chemical change, but actually it's an energetic change which expresses itself hormonally and chemically. One's an expression of the other. There's an energetic change that goes on in the electromagnetic fields of the body at what we call puberty. They want the energy before that change takes place. It's like a nectar to them. Because, this world is nothing like we think it is, and that which is controlling it is nothing like we think it is. And I would just say this to people. Look at the night sky and think that you are looking at a tiny fraction of the Milky Way galaxy. And according to the latest, highest estimate, there are about 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. And that what we see and experience is a tiny band of frequency called visible light, which is so tiny it's almost laughable. Everything else that exists beyond it, our TV channel, if you like, is unseen to us. Now tell me that humans are the only form of life that we call intelligent life, when we're living on a planet which, according to mainstream science, is the equivalent, compared with the size of the universe, of a billionth of a pinhead. In other words, the idea that we are alone is insane. And eventually, you go through this web. That spider is not human. And it's that spider that is looking for the prepubescent energy of children. And it absorbs it through these pedophile satanic rings. Honestly, people can laugh if they like. I don't care. I'm after the truth, not a round of applause. And the world is nothing like we think it is. And so it's when you get into these deep levels that the world of the scene starts to make sense.
Well, they're laughing less and less as everything you've written about is slowly coming true, or quickly coming true. You've provoked a lot of thoughts in me there. So when I used to get to America as a younger person, I was shocked. I'd go to the post office and I'd see all these pictures of all these missing children, all plastered all over the walls. I couldn't believe it. With Madeleine McCann, do you think she is dead and the culprits will ever be found?
Well, unless something goes wrong with the cover-up, they'll never be found. The rings are very, very efficient in the way they work. They are well honed. They have their backs watched. You look at that story, and it's not impossible that Madeleine McCann is actually connected to Belgium. Belgium is an extraordinary centre for paedophilia, as is Britain. And there was the Dutro paedophile child abuser who went to jail for it. And they found kids in like a cage, a dungeon that he was keeping. And that was Belgium's Jimmy Savile. It opened the door. And it was leading, of course it was leading, it always leads to the upper echelon of society in Belgium. And the guy, the genuine investigator, there was a genuine investigator of the paedophile and child abuse in Jersey. And because he was genuine, and he was being supported by his chief of police, who was also genuine, they got rid of him. And they got rid of this investigator in Belgium who was genuine. And he was starting to get closer and closer to the big fish. So they get rid of him. And people come in and suddenly it's all shut down, which happened in Jersey and it happened in Belgium. So these things are everywhere. So, and what they do is another thing that the scale of it and the organization of it is extraordinary. They steal children to order. They will be asked for a child, maybe blue-eyed and blonde-haired with certain characteristics. They will then scan society looking for that child that meets those criteria of the client. And then they will steal them. I've met people who've been in mind control projects in America. I met one in California once, and she'd come out of it, but there were kids running around in the room, and she says every time I see kids running around, she says my heart goes, because if I was doing what I did before, she was doing it under my control. Any of those kids, I'd have them away, and you never see them again. One of the things they do is they'll have a van or a white van or a van, and they'll sit there. And they'll just wait for the child to be far enough away from parental help or whatever, in the back of the van, and away. Or they might even just sit there in the van. The man moves, so there's no one. Or a van drove away, and then they drive it away. And those kids are never seen again. They're trafficked or whatever, and most of them end up dead. Because when you have no empathy, and you are completely consumed by psychopathy, I remember once when the stuff, it never gets matter of fact, but you have to step back from it when you research it, like I do. You have to step back from it, otherwise it will destroy you emotionally. And when I was in America and a series of things happened, and I realized the scale of it. I remember I was watching a movie that night. I was traveling around America, and in a cinema, and I turned around as we were walking out, and the father was carrying his little child, a boy, over his shoulder. So the boy was looking back at me as his father went forward. I was standing behind, and I looked at this child's face. And I just started to cry, because I'm looking at that face of an innocent little kid, and children like that in vast numbers all over the world are being abused, they're being murdered, they're being sacrificed. And most people, members of the public, are going, oh, it's too fantastic, don't be ridiculous. And of course, as they do that, the people who are actually doing it go on doing it unchallenged. And that's what I've named so many of them. I've named in my book since the 1990s, Father George Bush and Ted Heath. And I mentioned Lord McAlpine in regard to paedophilia in The Biggest Secret in 1998. There was no court case, and yet when someone didn't name him on the BBC, but it was taken that he was talking about Lord McAlpine, all hell broke loose. He's threatening to sue everybody. The Speaker's wife in the Houses of Parliament pays him 50 grand or something for not, actually coming out with it outright. I think George Monbiot, another excuse for a journalist on The Guardian, paid him something, all these people. And they weren't even saying he was a paedophile. They were just like tongue-in-cheek, like not, pointing towards him. And while that was going on, I was putting on my internet site, the guy's a frickin' paedophile. Never came for me. And this is how they kind of bat it away. One of the reasons they didn't, they never got Savile, although there were some people that tried, is because he threatened legal action. And then there was a guy called Peter Morrison, MP in Chester, who was a close bosom buddy of Margaret Thatcher throughout her prime ministerial period and before she became leader of the Conservative Party, who was a known paedophile. Edwina Currie, a Conservative MP, in her diaries, said that she was worried, in one of her diary entries, she was worried that Peter Morrison was going to be given a job by Margaret Thatcher that might be damaging the Conservative Party because, of course, he's a known paedophile. And she says in the diary that Norman Tebbit, who was chairman of the Conservative Party, had talked to the MP, Peter Morrison, about his paedophile activities, but Peter Morrison promised to be discreet. So now we have it in Edwina Currie's own diary. The chairman of the Conservative Party knew this guy was a paedophile. And I remember the former Daily Mirror editor saying they wanted to get Peter Morrison for his paedophilia, but he always threatened with legal action. So now you have a paedophile, Peter Morrison, who was a very close associate and supporter and bosom buddy of Margaret Thatcher. You have Lord McAlpine, who was the Svengali and money maker for the campaigns of Margaret Thatcher. And you had Margaret Thatcher, who was a close friend of Jimmy Savile, who was a close friend of the British royal family. It's a cesspit, Shaun. A frickin' cesspit. And we have to have the bollocks to say so. And if we're sure of our facts, to name names and not worry about consequences, but let the names worry about the consequences. Because they'll never have those consequences while people are in fear of speaking the truth.
So I was raised Catholic, and I know Catholic priests that do good work around the world. But then I watch these documentaries on Netflix like Sins of the Father, where these paedophile priests, Catholic Church brings in the highest priced lawyers, gets them either minimum sentences or no sentences, promises the victims that justice will be served and they'll be disciplined, this won't happen again. And all they do is move them 20 miles away to another area where they do exactly the same thing. And then they come in and protect them and protect them and protect them. Is the Vatican running and protecting one of the biggest paedophile networks in the world?
100%. You see, again, you have to connect dots, and you have to connect dots not just in present day, but across the centuries. The Church of Rome, what is now known as the Roman Church, is the Church of Babylon relocated. Christianity is a publicly acceptable face of the religion of Babylon. And the Babylonian religion involved pedophilia and Satanism. It was a satanic religion. Therefore, as humanity started to grow up and mature a bit, and sacrifice in your face publicly was no longer acceptable, it started to go underground. When abuse of children, pedophilia and stuff, became unacceptable, it went underground. It didn't stop, it just went into the shadows. And so in Babylon, they had the trinity of Nimrod, the father god, Ninos Tamos, the virgin-born son, and they had on the third point of the trinity, Queen Semiramis, the goddess. And they said in their stories that Nimrod died and became the sun god Baal, who impregnated Semiramis with the rays of the sun, and therefore she gave a virgin birth to Ninos Tammuz. When the Babylonian religion relocated to Rome, this is how that Rome almost seamlessly moved to Christianity, because to people not much had changed. They had the Trinity of the Father God (brackets Nimrod), Jesus, the virgin-born Son (brackets Nanos Timos, Ninos), and at the other point of the pyramid is the Holy Spirit, the Holy Ghost, which they symbolize as a dove. That was Queen Semiramis' symbol in Babylon. And what they did is they took all the attributes given by the Babylonians to Queen Semiramis, Virgin Mother, Queen of Heaven, all that stuff, and they gave them to the invented figure of Mother Mary. And they moved on. And so all these religions, that Christianity is a dual religion. There's the mass of the religion, which operates in the public arena. And that's where they do things like the Eucharist. They drink the blood as red wine, and they eat the flesh as a biscuit. And then there's the core of it, which is the religion of Babylon, and they literally drink the blood and literally eat the flesh, right? And that's, of course, much smaller than that, very smaller than that. But that's the dynamic, you see. And so the obsession that this has and this network has with pedophilia, I mean, you got choir boys everywhere. If you're a pedophile, are you going to go where there's only adults? I want to get a job where there's only adults. I'm a pedophile. No, you're going to go where the children are. So you have to look at the care homes, lack of it. Yeah, this is not knocking people at work with children in care homes. There's a fantastic number of people who are absolutely genuine people and care for the kids. Not knocking that, not talking in generalizations. I'm talking in the numbers that are not like that. So you look at care homes, you look at children's homes, you look at churches with all the choir boys. Look where the children are, and you'll find the pedophiles. It's not an obvious cause and effect, is it, really? And so you look at the structure of the Roman Church. It's obviously going to attract an enormous number of pedophiles. And of course, also, when you completely usurp the natural energetic order, and you say you can only be a priest if you don't get married and you don't have sex, well, that impulse, which is obviously a natural impulse, that's how humans are still alive, and we have new generations. Well, it's going to express itself in distorted ways, and not the ways that it would normally express itself. That's not to excuse it. My God, I'm the last person in the world who would excuse it. I've spent decades uncovering it, but that too is part of how this stuff manifests.
So you mentioned Savile, and that's led on to the next question. I read Princess Di's book in her own words. You said about him having access to all of the inner royal circle. When Di and Charles were going through friction, he was brought in as a marriage guidance counsellor.
Absolutely.
And Diana wrote in a book that she found him creepy, and she was wondering why he was there as well.
Yeah, well, this lady who's Diana's friend, she told me that story. What would it be? 1997, I think she told me the story. It was after Diana died, and she mentioned that what do you mean? Diana was saying, what do you mean? He's coming in as a go-between. What? No, where was all this when Savile was revealed for what he was? Why wasn't Prince Charles sat and questioned about his relationship with Savile and what he knew, because he had to know. Don't tell me you didn't know Charlie, you bloody liar. Of course he knew. So why is he still standing in line to be the next king and not standing in line for the next slop out? Why? Because the establishment looks after its own.
Wasn't one of the royals caught up with the Lolita Express, the island, the investment banker?
Prince Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, Epstein.
Epstein, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, the little black book, which Blair was in and Trump was in.
Clinton.
And the pedophile plane of Epstein, which Bill Clinton took many rides in. Yeah, honestly, if people only knew the scale of what goes on in the world, they would see the world through very different eyes. Because the world is not what that frickin' thing in the corner tells you. It's not what the internet giants tell you. It's what's actually happening, and that's what they don't want to tell you.
What flabbergasted me the most in Di's book, in her own words, was she wrote that she'd sent a letter to her lawyer saying that she thought Charles was going to have her killed, possibly by a car accident. So who do you think killed Di and why? And was she pregnant?
Well, I don't know if she was pregnant, but I think that whole story was full of holes and full of propaganda rather than truth. But you mentioned the letter. The friend of Diana, she was a alternative healer at what was then called, still there, the Hope Clinic near Regent's Park. And Diana used to go to her for treatment. And this lady told me that, quote, friendly people from MI5 used to come and leave notes for Diana because they knew she would pick them up and not be, they could do it covertly. And she said that some of these notes from MI5, friendly people in MI5, were warning Diana that her life was in danger. So, the idea that the official story of Diana's death is how it was is insane. There's so many holes in it. First of all, her security that day, which was decided by Mohammed al-Fayed, by the way, was absolutely insane. It was much less than someone like Madonna would get. And they were offered the chance by the French authorities for the French area of the authorities which looked after celebrities and the security of celebrities in Paris, to increase the security, and it was turned down. And then you have this situation where they decide, it was Dodi Fayed on the phone to his father, and they decided, in other words, his father must have decided, because he ran Dodi Fayed with a rod of iron, really, in terms of everything he said went. And they decided that they were going to put a decoy car out the front, which was the car that Diana and him had been traveling in around Paris all day. And they were also going to put the one protection vehicle with that to kid the... we're going to put it out the front to kid the so-called paparazzi that they were going to come out. Because they've been putting out, I think through Max Clifford, that there was a possible announcement of an engagement, all that stuff coming. So there was a bit of a frenzy, which was all kind of whipped up during the day. And the other plan was that another car would be brought out the back, and they would go to Dodi Fayed's flat next to the Arc de Triomphe in that car, and that Henri Paul, the security guy at the Ritz Hotel, would be pulled back in from wherever he was. He disappeared for 3 hours. No one seems to know where he went, to drive the car. And the limousine company that provided the car was basically controlled by Mohammed Al-Fayed because it was getting its clientele from the Ritz Hotel. This car had been stolen some time before, had a few things ripped out of it. I think the wheels disappeared, and then it was kind of out of action and stuff was done on it and repaired. And then this was the car that turned up. Now, when you talk to security people, they say the idea of bringing a new car into a situation, there you go, late at night, which had been not checked at all, there could have been a bomb in it, there could have been anything in it, was ridiculous and insane. So they now get in the car. They could have stayed the night at the Ritz Hotel if they were worried about the paparazzi. I mean, Al-Fayed did bloody own it, or at least in theory. And then, so Henry Paul gets in the car and he drives. Now, what you do, because I went to Paris, I walked the route twice. When I was researching The Biggest Secret, I walked the route twice. You come out the back of the Ritz Hotel and you come down to a street, you turn right, and eventually you come to the Place de la Concorde, which has a big obelisk in the middle of it, which is all secret society, Freemasonic, Egyptian stuff. It's actually an original ancient Egyptian obelisk. And then you turn right in the middle of the square and you go up the Champs-Élysées and there's his flat. And that, because they'd been to his flat a couple of times that day, and that's the route they took. When they were coming to the Ritz Hotel, they came down the Champs-Élysées, onto the Place de la Concorde, up that street, bang, Ritz Hotel. No. Henry Paul goes past the Champs-Élysées on the Place de la Concorde and turns right onto a fast motorway, which, if you look at the map, here's the Ritz Hotel, there's his flat there. This is the route you take that Henry Paul took to go through the Pont d'Arme tunnel. He's going away from the flat, and he's going away apparently at high speed. And he hits the 13th pillar. There's 17 traffic cameras on the road between the Ritz Hotel and the Pont d'Arme tunnel, including one right on the top looking down over the entrance. Saw it myself, took a picture of it. Everyone wasn't working in the period that car made that journey. Then there was a guy sitting on a bench near the Arc de Triomphe, which is just across the river from the Pont d'Arme tunnel where she died, or where the crash happened. And he's one of these guys that loves to listen into police frequencies, police transmissions. He didn't know until he got home, but in that same period, the traffic cameras weren't working. All police frequencies went down in the central Paris. Silence. And he said when they came back, there were so many people trying to talk at the same time. He's never heard any chaos like it. And so the car crashes. And another thing, a guy called Rhys Jones, who's the security guard in the front seat. When you're a security guard in those situations, you don't put a seatbelt on because you want to be able to react very quickly. This is what security people say is the normal procedure. So he starts off in the car from the Ritz. He hasn't got a seatbelt on, and neither have Dodi Fayed and Diana. And then there was a photographer called Romond Rat, who caught up with the car at the Place de la Concorde, at the lights, and managed to get a picture. Rhys Jones' seatbelt's still not on. Neither is Diana's and neither is Dodi Fayed's. Literally, at the speed they was going, a minute, 90 seconds down the road when they crashed, Rhys Jones had his seatbelt on. But they didn't. Now, if you're a security guard, A, why are you putting the seatbelt on? Something must be going wrong. And secondly, why have you turned around and said, put your seatbelt on? So the car hits the 13th pillar. And just by coincidence, it's an amazing thing, synchronicity. Coming the other way, exactly at that time, was a medical guy who has been working in Paris in emergency kind of response, and his friend, though the relationship was never really fully understood, an American was with him. So he stops the car, he goes across, and he says Diana's, witnesses said Diana was still alive. And then she's not. And by the time she got to the hospital, she's dead. And it took ages to get to the hospital.
So delayed intentionally. Yeah,
it took ages to get to the hospital. And when they were questioned about why it took so long, they said, well, basically we had to free her from the car. Well, witnesses said actually she was free. She was lying on the back seat, and part of her was outside the door. So she wasn't trapped at all. And she had an injury, if the official story of the injury is true, which needed urgent surgery to stem the blood flow. But it took ages to get. It was about an hour and 25 minutes to get them to the hospital, where they said they tried to save her, but according to the post-mortem, she was dead before that. And so everything happened to put her in that position with no security, and to make sure she didn't survive. And the Pont d'Alma Tunnel, go into it now, but the Pont d'Alma Tunnel means basically bridge or passage of the moon goddess. And of course, the ancient goddess Diana was an ancient moon goddess, going back to places like Babylon. And again, in The Biggest Secret, I've looked at Diana's assassination. I mean, it was from a ritualistic point of view, and it's incredible, the detail of the ritual around her death.
Why did she have to go?
Well, I think, you've always got this in the background, if you go deep enough in the rabbit hole, that they do ritualistically kill people for ritualistic reasons. But if you look at it on a 5 sense here and now level, she knew literally and symbolically where the bodies were buried of the British royal family, and she showed in a Panorama interview that she was prepared to talk about it. She was angry. She had a great public support. She couldn't do anything without the media were there, and so she had tremendous potential power to destroy the royal family. She really did at that time, because the royal family were incredibly unpopular then, and especially in the aftermath of her death, they were very unpopular. But that was okay. They knew that was going to happen. But the source of their potential destruction was no longer alive, and of course has now been basically forgotten and not disappeared from history, but no one really talks about her anymore. And the royal family is still with us. But at that time, the very monarchy itself was starting to rock. It was starting to be a journalist's spine, vibrating and
Mr. Jelly,
turning to jelly. Yeah. So she was someone who knew a hell of a lot. And see, when I spoke to her friend, and I've still got the interview on tape, one of those old, cassette tapes. It was very clear that the Panorama interview was like the tip of the iceberg of what she could destroy them with. And I had another story relating to this. I went to see, I spent many visits with this Zulu shaman, Credo Mutwa. And when I first met him, he said to me that he didn't tell me who it was to start with, and then later, when we got more friendly and very close, he told me. He said that Princess Diana called him, because Diana was very much into the esoteric. That's why she was, friend of this alternative healer. He said, she called me. She said, to me, I'm calling you from a store. And so Credo said, well, Princess Diana of England is calling me from a store. This has got to be a joke, basically. And he didn't believe her. But what this lady, her friend, told me is whenever Diana wanted, because she knew everything that she did was bugged and everywhere was bugged, whenever she wanted to talk absolutely privately, she would go into a I think it was a Marks and Spencer store, and she'd use the phone incognito as she could, because then she would be trying to avoid the bugs and everything because she wanted privacy. So I said to Craig, what'd she say? She said to me, basically, I've got something to reveal that is absolutely fantastic. It was about the royal family. And she wanted to meet him, but they never met because, she died. But she knew a hell of a lot. And we could talk forever about this, but, I have gone into it in the books, and, a lot of people still laugh at me because I say that actually the royal family is not human, not totally human. I say they are hybrids. They have a human energy field, which is the one that we see, and they have a non-human energy field, which is the one that we don't see. And during the rituals, they shift. I spoke to so many people around, that have seen this and have taken part in rituals where they've seen it. It's all in my books. And this friend of Diana told me the same. And she didn't know at the time that I'd got lots of other sources who'd said the royal family are not human. They're hybrids, part human, part not human. And that's where the bloodlines come from. That's where the royal bloodlines come from. Why are royal bloodlines considered so special? The divine right to rule, where does that come from? It's because they're hybrids. They're not like the rest of us, right? And so I didn't tell Christian Fitzgerald, this lady, the friend of Diana, Christian Fitzgerald, her name was, any of this. And yet she told me that the royal family are not human. And Diana knew that. That, to me, because Credo Mutwa talks about the fact that there are people running the world that he calls the Chittahuri, who are not human but seem to be, right? So you can see why, very strongly in theory, Diana, who knew this, would contact him saying, I've got something basically massive to reveal. I won't talk to you about it. Well, otherwise, would you want to talk to him about it? But he was someone who talked about that. It's all in my books. I did you can get it on the internet, I think, a 6-hour interview with Credo Mutwa about this non-human element from his Zulu shamanistic point of view.
To orchestrate that much death and destruction, definitely some reptilian psychopathy going on in there. But let's get on to the next question. Some people have referred to you and Alex Jones as the biggest, most famous conspiracy theorist in the world. I've watched your career rise. I've watched Alex's career rise. Love the stuff he did early on with John Ronson going into Bohemian Grove. He's interviewed some fascinating characters like Freeway Ricky Ross, who I've interviewed for one of my books. What do you think about Alex getting deplatformed, and what's all that about?
Well, first of all, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm a conspiracy researcher, which is a different thing. And it's interesting, Shaun, that the term conspiracy theory and conspiracy theorist came into widespread use because of the CIA. In the 1960s, when they were trying to discredit people that didn't believe that a single bullet went through several people and that killed President Kennedy, the single bullet theory, that they were trying to discredit them. They wrote to major media organizations or contacted them. You can see the document on the internet in the 1960s, urging them to use the terms conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists to discredit people who were questioning the Kennedy assassination. And all these years later, these journalists, the ones with the backbones vibrating, they're still trying to discredit people by calling them conspiracy theories and what they say conspiracy theories. And 99% of them will not know that originated with the CIA. too busy watching the newsroom telly. So if you look at Alex, I mean, there's many things that I agree with Alex about. There's many things I don't agree with him about. I didn't agree with his support for Trump, for instance. But anyway, my point of view, and it is, first of all, that whatever people may say about Alex Jones, he has communicated an enormous amount of information that people needed to hear. I might, not completely agree on the way that the angle he comes from and how he interprets it. That's the word I'm looking for, interprets it. But who cares? The basics of what he's been saying all these years, as he's communicated it, people needed to hear. And I have a simple philosophy. You let people hear all opinion and all possibility, and then you have the basic human decency and the absence of arrogance to say, there's all the information, make of it what you will, and you have every right to decide what to make of it. That's an open, human, free society where all information is available, and then people are respected in their right to interpret that information as they see fit. That is not the goal, which is ensuring that only what the authorities want people to see and hear do they see and hear. So Alex Jones and his deplatforming, and I'll be honest, I think Alex could have been a bit more streetwise here and there and not walked into their traps. But never mind. He has an absolute right to his freedom of speech. And this is a big point, Shaun, here. There's a key line. And that line decides whether we live in a tyranny or whether we live in a free society. And that line is the point of delivery of information. If you censor before, after the point of delivery, in other words, if you're calling for terrorism or you're calling for violence or burning a house down, there are laws to deal with that. But those laws kick in after the point of delivery. You have to say it, and then we'll deal with it. What that means is why this line is so crucial. It means that under those circumstances, no authority is given the right to decide what people see and hear. Because people see and hear everything, and then it's dealt with if it needs dealing with. Once you come to where we are now, and this is where Alex Jones is part of this, what's happened to him, is you come before the point of delivery. Now, once you are censoring information before the point of delivery, you have now given authority the power to decide what the public see and hear. And of course, what has happened, is you start out by saying, we must ban people calling for terrorism. Well, first of all, do you want to know who's calling for terrorism or not? So you want them to say it in public, and then you deal with it. If you force them underground, they're still saying it. It's just you're not seeing it anymore. It's ridiculous, right? So once you start, we must stop, incitement to terrorism. And most people who are not streetwise enough to see where it's leading say, yeah, I can understand that. But then it starts, and then it goes beyond that. Now it's fake news. Well, who decides what's fake news? Well, we do. On what basis? Well, whether we want you to see it or not. Yeah, okay. And so if they were genuinely wanting to ban fake news, then there would be no BBC News, there'd be no CNN, there'd be no MSNBC, there'd be no Fox News, none of it. But it's not about banning fake news. It's about using that as an excuse to ban what you don't want people to see. Then you have hate speech. That was the next in line. Hate speech. We must ban hate speech. Who decides what hate speech is? Well, we do.